Good morning, and welcome to the Back Porch Stories, the first of what I hope will be many mornings of great storytelling and wonderful music that'll be accessible to all kinds of folks from the Inglewood and Ramsey area and maybe even across the internet, and as they say on CKUA, to the whole world. Wouldn't that be great? This morning, it's my pleasure to introduce, and you're welcome to clap. This morning, that is an appropriate response. This morning, it's my pleasure to introduce two artists from Alberta. Well, one of them's from Alberta now, but two artists who make their home here in Alberta. One of them is an artist that we get to have in our midst every week, and we get to enjoy the writing that comes from his soul every morning. But this morning specifically, he's going to tell us stories that have been brewing inside of him probably for his whole life. And I'm hoping that as we get to know Ed Top, the storyteller, not necessarily Ed Top, the pastor at the Lantern Community Church, that we fall in love with the stories that have been placed inside of him to tell. I want to invite you to come and be a part of those stories. Join us in the backyard. We all know the experience of being in the backyard, don't we? Of course. Don't you ever peer over the fence of your neighbor and just look back there and wonder, what are they doing over there? I do. I never wonder. I always think to myself, they always have people over. What are they doing? They're up all night. What do they talk about? It never ceases to amaze me how they just seem to have people over and over and over again, and they hang out. Naomi and I, they must look into and they must look into our backyard and say, do those people ever leave the house? Because we're never in our backyard. But you all have that experience of looking into the backyard and thinking to yourself, I wonder what my neighbor's doing. Well, that is a little bit about what this is about. Ed comes from a background of being a journalist. He was a junior high teacher for a while. Who knew that? Man, I'm glad I never went to his class. But Ed was a journalist before he became a pastor. And he told me that he was a journalist for the Orangeville Citizen. Not only was he a journalist, he actually was the editor, which he said meant that he was the chief cook and bottle washer and pretty much did everything. Because Orangeville, anybody know where Orangeville is? See, there's a few people, yeah. Orangeville is not such a big place. However, it was a place filled with characters, all kinds of people that Ed would have to get out and meet on a Saturday morning and say, what's going on in your world? And how did that happen to you? And tell me that story about that. I think that was the beginning of these stories. That was how he began to formulate what would be these great, funny stories that he's got inside of him. Ed also traveled through Europe and did some writing and some journalism in Europe as well. And that is when he talks about that, and when I hear him speak about that stuff, I think to myself, what a rich body of experience that he brings into his writing. And I'm so excited to hear that piece as well. As well as, if you know Ed, one of my favorite parts about Ed is he's never afraid to ask the strange question. You know, the question that you think to yourself, did you just really say that? Did I hear that correctly? He's never afraid to ask that question. And sometimes even at his own expense. Sometimes I see Ed ask these questions, and there's people around looking going, what? What did you just say? Did you really ask me that? And that is in his stories too. And I'm excited about what we're about to hear. And then, last but not least, we have one of my favorite young musical artists in Alberta. This guy, from the first time I heard him sing, I thought to myself, is there some 50, 60-year-old man trapped up in that young body? Because Joe Nolan has found a way to, I wrote it down. I thought it was so good. I'm not a very good wordsmith. I leave that to Ed, but this is what I put. Joe has a soul that breathes in stories, captures images with words, and crafts them into melodies. And with that, I'd like to invite to the stage Joe Nolan.
Morning. Got nothing but bruises, old walking in the rain. The gentleman always loses his midnight baby. You put a note in my pocket, you put a kiss on my cheek. You say thanks for walking home with me. Well, I can lift you up, I can bring you down. Are you afraid of love, or are you afraid to drown? You got everywhere to run, you got every place to hide, with every reason by your side. Give me kisses in the dark, baby, in the shadows of the night, in the curtains of tomorrow, in the cupboards of our lives, in the secrets of your eyes, in the morning lullaby, with every wave goodbye, one more time. Thanks. Just gonna do one more here. Cross the bridge, make sense. The river is frozen tonight. Come stand with me on the edge, make your pledge. doubts and meet me. I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. Thank you.
I thought Joe was just getting started, but you're going to be back, right? We're just not going to let you sing one or two songs. We're going to keep you here all morning. Hey, good morning. My name's Ed. Thanks for the introduction, Derek. I was listening to Derek, and I was wondering who the guy was that he was talking about. And it occurred to me, I hope no one who really knows me is here this morning. Let's get going on this, and then we're going to invite Joe back up. It was on sale. Not just 10%, not even 50%. It was a heart-stopping 75% off the regular price. Pete knew they were just offloading them, but he was fine with that. These kinds of things made his day, his week. Sort of took up the bulk of his life. And it looked like a pretty good project to do with the kids. Projects with the kids were at a premium these days. As school was still 2 weeks away. 2 more blasted weeks away. Pete enjoyed working around the house, though his kids tended to flee whenever he picked up a shovel. It wasn't that he was necessarily bad at swinging a hammer or pushing that black button on the drill. Actually, he was pretty good. He loved revving up that drill before actually screwing at anything at all. Folks would come over and comment on the deck, the garden, the lawn, and ask, "Who did this?" "Why, I did," he'd say, pretending to be sheepish about it. No, Pete was handy around the house, so that's not why the kids looked to escape. It was more that his demeanor changed whenever there was a project to be done. The kids knew that every mission undertaken was this epic endeavor, or more like an urgent struggle to survive. A degree of intensity was generated that could blast an astronaut into space. Whatever it was, it demanded extreme attention, like walking through a minefield. And yet everything had to be done quickly, as if there was a lightning storm or a prairie fire on the way. So when Pete saw the 10-foot by 10-foot gazebo at Home Depot for a mere $145, down from $499, his eyes started seeing things in slow motion. And a warm sweat began smearing on the curve of his back. It had that effect on the kids too, but for completely different reasons. And this wasn't a floor model either. There must have been 5 of them, all packed tight in their separate cardboard boxes. He could have picked up all 5 for, carry the 2, $725. But as he wasn't exactly sure that he even needed one, he quickly dismissed the idea of getting all 5. But not quickly. He considered buying all 5 to sell next spring on Kijiji. But no, Mary would kill him. What really got Pete was the picture on the cardboard box displaying 4 solid steel-beamed poles, strong like Roman columns. That's quality, he thought. And the canvas was canvas, not some cheap plastic tarp stuff. And it came with mosquito netting and zippers all the way around. Zippers everywhere. Zippers, you gotta. And it had this extra separate, squared, teepee-pointed canvas seemingly floating on top from nothing at all. That's creative, he said, to no one in particular. He was sure the instructions would explain everything. And all this for $145, $158 including tax. Andrew, age 11, Liz, 10, and Sharon, 6 years young, knew that there was no stopping their dad now. That little bead of sweat was forming underneath his nose. Andrew and Sharon, he announced with the bulbs in his hand, go get us a great big wagon. Liz and I will wait right here, as if 5 customers were about to show up and take all the remaining gazebos. Kids, we're going to put up the gazebo on the new deck. Oh yeah, baby. Dad had a cheeky grin smothered on most of his face. You said we were only going to get light bulbs, complained Liz. Just light bulbs, eyeing the tent and estimating the time of construction. It was true. The kids had only agreed to come along because Dad had promised, quote, a short trip, and that it would be an adventure, and probably a purchase too with their names on it. We're not helping, okay, Dad? Said Andrew. We'll do it all together, Pete said, like a real family. We're already a real family, said 6-year-old Sharon, practically in tears, eyeing Liz suspiciously. Am I really adopted, Daddy? No, said Pete. Liz, what have you been telling her? Nothing, said Liz. Liz, you and Andrew, you get the wagon, and now, Pete said through his teeth. He'd set Sharon right about her family of origins, while the 2 oldest got the transport for the gazebo. Sometimes he wondered how these beautiful children would ever get along in life. They had absolutely no sense of adventure or challenge or discipline. That's what dads are for, thought Pete. 5 minutes later, Andrew and Liz came back with one of those small little buggies, the ones that fill up with a jug of milk. The gazebo package must have been 15 feet long. I said a wagon. We couldn't find any, said Andrew. They're all gone, said Liz. After laying down $158, Pete precariously balanced the entire gazebo on this little buggy all the way to the truck, eyeing the collection of large wagons in plain sight across the parking alley. What are those? Oh, those, said Andrew. The kids stared out the window all the way back, trying to ignore the cheerful banter, Pete's cheerful banter. After tying the gazebo down in the back of the truck, he knew it wasn't getting anywhere. This is going to be so great, he said. $158. On the kitchen table, Dad made the children read the instructions because he knew it was good for them and because he hated reading them himself. Pete was a hard worker, just not a very smart one. He preferred to read the picture on the instructions once and get right to work. Eventually, he'd have to read the instructions and then ask his wife to interpret them. Today, Mary was upstairs and Pete had to rely on Liz. Soon, poles and canvas and nuts and bolts and bits of cardboard littered the backyard like a junkyard after a windstorm. No one was having any fun yet. Pete asked Andrew to put the numbered poles in a series of piles, but after organizing them several times amidst much yelling and counter-yelling, it soon became apparent that 3 of them were missing, critical poles, although every pole is critical when setting up a gazebo. Only Andrew agreed to return to Home Depot with his dad. In exchange, Pete had promised to play catch for an hour later on in the day. Pete had bargained and wheeled and dealed for only 30 minutes, but lost. No, we didn't miscount, Pete said 3 times to 3 different attendees. We're missing 3 bee poles. Finally, the 3 bees were found in a damaged package in the back of the store. In this morgue of a place, Peter and 11-year-old Andrew saw the carcass of a gazebo that looked a lot like the mess scattered through their backyard. Will these 3 do the trick? Said the sales guy who didn't look much older than Andrew. Andrew took the poles, but he couldn't take his eyes off the former gazebo lying dead in a torn up cardboard box. Looks like it went through the washing machine, Andrew said. It was a sign of things to come. With much fanfare and neighborhood amusement, the 10 by 10 gazebo slowly made its way skyward. Only 2 times did it have to be taken apart because someone had put the pole in backwards or a canvas had been strapped upside down. Friends and strangers had passed by in the back alley, calling things out like, "You know what you're doing, Pete? And those kids are sure working pretty hard out there, aren't they?" Real funny. Pete hated all this talk when he was concentrating on the job at hand, educating his children on the dynamics of life and the value of a hard-earned dollar. It was demoralizing to see his kids try to sneak off every time he turned his back to talk to one of these neighbors. 4 hours later, Pete got the kids to ask Mom to come outside and view the monstrosity on the new deck. "Mommy, come see!" shouted an excited Sharon. The team beamed its pleasure as Mom pretended to delight in the gazebo. She stood in the middle, under the tarp, looking skyward to that teepee top thing floating on nothing but 4 hidden poles. "Want to know how we got that little teepee top thing up there on top there?" Pete asked. "No, not really," Mary replied deadpan. "We put it up ourselves," said Sharon, "like a real family." She was glaring at Liz. "Nice," Mom said. "Why do we need a gazebo exactly?" "Because it was on sale," shouted Andrew. "Look," explained Peter to Mary, trying to speak very slowly, "when people come over for meetings or for a supper, we can meet under the safety of this place." "Oh, I'm glad you slowed that down for me," said Mary. "I'm not a moron." "Sorry," said Peter. "Sorry, but this thing is entirely practical." I thought you said you didn't like holding meetings out on the deck because the neighbors might listen in," Mom said. "That was before the sale," said Liz. Mary, listen, on these hot summer days, we can eat out here, and look at all these zippers. Mom looked skeptical and reminded Peter that in Calgary, there are only 7 hot summer days in the whole year. "Look," Peter argued, "everyone has got a gazebo these days." The kids looked around and almost in unison said, "None of our neighbors do." "And all these zippers don't look all that strong, dear," Mary said. "One good zip and the whole side is as good as gone. In fact, one good wind." And then Andrew started reminiscing about the dead gazebo he had seen in the morgue at Home Depot. "Yeah, you should have seen it, Mom. It looked like—" Pete had had enough. "You'll thank me later," he said, marching up to the house, "and I'll expect apologies all the way around." "I'm thanking you now," said little Sharon. She was doing a pirouette under the magic roof. Pete stopped at the porch and surveyed the masterpiece. It did look good, just like that photograph on the cardboard box. Sharon and Pete were kindred spirits. The back door slammed as Pete made his way to the office upstairs, leaving Mom and the kids to get off the deck back into the sunlight. Pete went upstairs to get some work done before Andrew would remember that he had promised to play a whole hour of catch in the backyard. He tried to concentrate, but 30 minutes later he was struggling to keep his eyes open and decided to give it up and take a nap. The gazebo had taken a lot out of him. He drifted off to sleep, satisfied that the gazebo completed the deck to perfection. Pete was awakened from a beautiful dream. It was about some foggy image of friends around a table on the new deck, deep in shade. Everyone was enjoying themselves immensely, laughing at something witty he had just said. Next thing, the group was leaning in quietly to hear him say something profound about parenting and the national economy. Mosquitoes were trying to get into the sacred place, but to no avail. The zippers effectively blocking each entrance. The last thing he remembered before somebody had jumped on him was looking over to his wife with a smirk, saying, "What did I tell you? You can thank me now." "Daddy, get up! It's hailing and the gazebo is gone!" Sharon had landed square on his chest. Pete's first thought was that now then the mosquitoes would be able to get in. He must have said it out loud because Sharon said, "They can't get in. It's gone. There's nothing to get into." 6-year-olds had these vivid imaginations, and Peter sat up, though, sucking in for air, and looked out the bedroom window. It was his imagination that might need an overhaul. Things like bushes and fences and trees and bird feeders, deck chairs were all leaning to the east. Leaning because they were flying that way. Leaning because they were somersaulting that way. Even the neighbor's house was leaning to the east. Peter bolted downstairs, Sharon in tow, weeping in fear. "Oh, Daddy, Daddy, we're all going to die." Andrew and Liz were courageously cowering underneath the kitchen table with the building instructions to the gazebo covering their heads. Pete noticed that they weren't reading them. Sounded like they were shouting about a hurricane and a wicked witch to the west. Pete got to the back door and looked out the window. The 10 by 10 gazebo, 9 feet tall, heavily umbrellaed by a 10-foot canvas, was gone. Well, not exactly gone. It was bobbing upside down, 20, 25, 30 feet up in the air, dangling like Mary Poppins between drooping electrical wires. It was mostly in the neighbor's backyard, sagging back and forth. One of the magnificent Roman columns jabbing against the roof of the garage. The dancing trapeze gazebo seemed to be enjoying itself, giggling on the lines which crisscrossed the neighbor's yard to reach their place. The upside-down gazebo was struggling to head east with the rest of the neighborhood. The wind was seemingly furious with the wire for not letting it go. "This is preposterous," thought Pete. "The world has lost its mind." He hadn't opened the back door yet. The green grass had turned silk white, like a baseball team had been practicing in the backyard and had left all the balls, all 2,000 of them there. Where had this storm come from? All at once, a lightning bolt whipped through the air, followed by a demanding thunder. If there had been room, Pete would have joined the 3 kids underneath the kitchen table. Mary was frantically running around the backyard, getting the clothes off the line, holding something like a notepad over her head as the hail pelted at her. One found its way past the notebook and bounced off the top of her head. It looked rather comical to Pete, but Mom soon demanded the grin off Pete's face by shouting something over the wind. Peter couldn't quite make it out. It was like Dorothy in the Twisted House scene at the Wizard of Oz. "Let more grass over near?" What? "Get more grass over here." What grass? One of the baseballs must have hit Mary on the head, Peter thought. Pete's one enduring emotion quickly kicked in: irritation. That gazebo was worth $499, excluding tax. Yes, he'd only paid $158, including tax, but no windstorm was going to blow the moment for him. Suddenly, oddly, he felt like being a superhero. "It's time, children," he shouted needlessly. "Well, try the coffee table in the living room," Liz said. "It's too full down here, Daddy," whimpered Sharon. If he had been Superman, he would have taken off his shirt and trousers to don some spandex. Instead, Peter opened the door and plunged into the chaos. He might well have shouted, "Up, up, and away," if the wind hadn't swallowed up his breath. It sounded more like, like a great war soldier leaping out of a trench in France. Pete was immediately hit with a hail of hail, wind, rain, and one of the neighbor's deck chairs heading east. He leaped through the air into the garage and grabbed an aluminum ladder. Pete had a plan. He had noticed that one of the gazebo legs had been bouncing off the garage roof, making bold, hopping movements like John Travolta in the movie Grease. Not that he'd ever seen the movie Grease, of course. The rain was impairing his vision, and maybe his thinking too, because as he exited the garage, another lightning bolt screeched through the sky, and the thunder didn't wait for an invitation. Undeterred, he leaned the ladder up on the gutter and climbed up onto the roof, one bold step at a time. The gazebo's Roman column dodged back and forth and up and down, devilishly laughing at the roar of the wind and the hail. Armageddon, thought Peter. So this was it. Lightning was flung through the air, and thunder rained down from the heavens. All his life had been a preparation for this moment. The end of the world as he knew it. The wrestling match had begun. But it was near impossible to wrench the upside-down gazebo from the twisted wire. It was too heavy. Peter couldn't get a grip. He had to get a grip. He glanced over and noticed a neighbor 2 houses down, standing on his sheltered back porch, taking pictures of the mess, taking pictures of him. Only then did it occur to him that he was still in his underwear. He hadn't worn pants for an afternoon nap since kindergarten. Why would he? Although this made him look a little bit more like Superman. The wind and the rain had no respect for the superhero's garb. Seeing the camera, he thought that this might be his moment. A picture of Pete saving the world in the Community Association's newsletter. He wondered what page he'd get. Then it dawned on Peter that this crazy neighbor wasn't taking pictures of him. The camera wasn't moving. He was making a movie. He was making a movie in the comfort of his sheltered and dry back porch. Pete had no time to get irritated. He was already irritated. He pulled the gazebo along the 2 wires. He managed to move slowly, 3 inches forward, 2 inches back, to slowly slide the contraption back west, back to the part of the fence whereby he hoped to flip it back on its side and back into the yard. He edged along the side of the roof as far as he dared, the waves of inconsistent bellows of gust making it difficult to keep his balance, not like a tightrope walker on top of Niagara Falls. Mary was yelling something from the porch, something like, "Get brown from bear. Get brown from bear." He'd have to remember to ask her about that later. The kids had come from under the table and were pointing at something. If only he would have put on that other pair of underwear that morning, he thought momentarily. He couldn't help but think that bright blue pair had kept everything nice and firm. These weren't doing him any justice. And that's when it happened. He felt a terrible jarring in his hand, and it bulleted up his left arm. A jolt, like a fork being put in an electrical outlet. Not that he'd ever done that at the age of 8 in that rental house back in Hamilton, Ontario. The force threw him backwards, and the leg of the kicking bull slipped from his hand. Strange how life becomes focused when you've been zapped with who knows how many jolts of electricity. How many thoughts can quickly compress into seconds. Immediately, Pete's left arm went completely numb right up to his shoulder. And he knew he was going to die. Joe, let's take a quick break here. We need a break from the action. Maybe you can help us out with a few minutes. And go for it for a while.
Well, this is a song called Tornado. I drove you home through that lightning storm. You whispered in my ear, you told me where, and I took you there. You had me scared. When all the stars lit up and were falling on my broken love, how do I turn this thing around? So I drove back home through that tornado. And the highway had you on. It's mine. When all of them stars lit up and were falling on my broken love, how do I turn this thing around? Thanks. All right, this next song is an old song. It's called "The Renter," and goes like this. This ain't a home, it's just a place that I stay just in case I change my mind. This ain't a road, it's just a race that I drive down every day just to see what I've left behind. if the future had a hand, what would it hold, and would you understand the story told about this land? And if truth was a command, who would lie in the sand? And what would make us all human? Whoa. 'Cause I'm a renter just like you, like he, like she, like we, like who. Sometime we all gotta move. I'm an old lonely buffalo in the field where the daisies grow. Sometime we all gotta go. I'm a renter just like you, like he, like she, like we, like who. Sometime we all gotta move. I'm an old lonely buffalo in the field where the daisies grow. Sometime we all gotta go. So we all gotta move. So we all gotta move. I'm a renter just like you, like he, like she, like we, like who. Sometime we all gotta move. Thanks.
Always leave me wanting more. How do you do that? Strange how life becomes focused when you've been zapped with who knows how many jolts of electricity. Immediately his left arm went numb right up to his shoulder, and he knew he was going to die. Sort of where we left it, right? Thoughts of his dear children, his wife. Was he ready to die? No! Would his wife remarry some other jerk? Probably. She tends to repeat mistakes. Who would now teach his children how to build stuff? No. Ready to face God? Would he have to stand in line? How many other people are dying in the world at this precise moment? What a stupid way to go. How Pete wished he'd put on that newly bought underwear that with all that support for the neighbor's movie shoot. His mother had been right. Always, always wear clean underwear in case some ambulance attendant has to scrape you off some rooftop. His neighbor would probably put the whole thing on this thing called YouTube, Pete thought. He wondered how many people would pay to see him disintegrate on the top of this roof in his underwear. He suddenly realized that he couldn't be dead, not yet. People don't think about things like YouTube in heaven. His arm ached for 4 hours afterwards. A mixture of jelly and cottage cheese and electric eel. Somehow, with Mary's help, in the end, they had managed to somersault the gazebo back into their yard. Bent poles, ripped canvas. That little teepee top thing torn to shreds. Like those holiday fishermen out on the Atlantic, having spent 2 hours hauling in a massive marlin. Now it sat lifeless, back on the porch, on its side, legs stretched out like a butchered hog, having breathed its last when the wind finally and suddenly disappeared. The storm ended like it began. Alberta is a weird province. Everything went oddly still. Blue skies, not even a breeze. Sun shining brightly, looking all innocent. Wasn't my fault, I'm just the sun. Pete began taking the gazebo apart with the kids. The kids tiptoed around their father's one endearing emotion, irritation. Pete worked the bolts with his good right arm. He was determined not to reflect on what happened. Keep it superficial. Concentrate on getting this $499 gazebo out of his life. Not that he had paid $499, probably even closer to $550 by the time tax was added. You're an awesome daddy, Sharon said. On the roof, he was in his underwear, Sharon said, Liz, embarrassed. I'd pay to see that again, said Andrew. Let's just take this apart, okay, said Peter. Where's Mommy? She's got an ice pack on her head, said Sharon. The gazebo came apart fairly quickly. Surprise, surprise. Pete thought perhaps that he could put the parts back in the box. The box had been kept nice and dry in the garage during the storm. He found he needed two boxes to fit the poles back in. How do they ever get all these pieces in the first place, he thought. Just throw them loose in the back of the truck and get it to the dump, Mary said, holding the pack on her head. We're not going to the dump with you, said Liz. But Pete had another idea. It had come to him while drying off in the bathroom. At first, he smiled it off, and then the adventurer in him whispered that it was worth a try. Maybe it wasn't the adventurer in him. Maybe it was something else. You see, the gazebo hadn't exactly worked out, hadn't exactly fit into the dynamics of the backyard decorum. Yes, that's right. Mary had thought it was rather large too, hadn't she? She had said something like that, something about the grass being too brown. And now that things were so packed away so neatly, so nicely, sort of. And another thing, hadn't they only had it for 6 hours? Actually less if you consider the lost time picking up those 3 missing bee poles. It was like the 5-second rule when you drop a cookie or a chip in the backyard. Yeah. Home gazebo sort of owed Pete one. The picture on the cardboard box had been enormously deceptive. Why, the gazebo had looked heavy and strong and solid. It was false advertising from the get-go. Yeah. They should have written something, some warning about the gazebo being able to take off in a violent windstorm. Like those apple pies being too hot at McDonald's. It was the same kind of thing, exactly. You can burn your mouth on one of those hot apple pies if you're not careful. This was all making sense to Pete as he put on dry clothes and clean underwear, the tight blue pair. And another thing, he'd nearly lost his life in a humiliating manner, salvaging this crappy piece of tent. Yeah, they owed him one. Kids, he announced, we're going back to Home Depot. Pete figured he might get a better hearing with 3 young kids in tow, family man. But standing in line at Home Depot, Dad wasn't so sure. Mary had given him the look as he was leaving. Relax! If they don't take it back, they don't take it back! Peter squealed at the look that said, you're not really going to do this, are you? Can I help you, sir? The woman behind the return counter asked. Yes, said Peter. He had been rehearsing his speech, practicing by twitching his lips back and forth. Suddenly, he was in the front of the line. The gazebo was lying on one of the large wagons, a bountiful in the parking lot. Again, he shoved away the feeling of guilt and concentrated on the return, recalling all the justifications he had added up at home. Yes, said Peter. I was here this late morning. Well, actually, early afternoon, if you count the 3 poles I had to come back for. Anything wrong with the product you're about to return, sir? She asked routinely, already looking at the next guy in line. Peter hadn't expected that question. How about, color not suit you, sir? How about, did you find it too large? How about, do you want to upgrade to our deluxe model, which is also on sale today? How about any other question? She tried again as the customer standing in front of her seemed a little distracted. Is it ready to be returned to the floor, sir? Peter stared at her as time stood still. Yes, pretty much, yes. Andrew was watching his dad. There was no color in his face. Liz was glancing around everywhere except in the direction of her father. As you can see, though, Pete carried on quickly, I couldn't get everything back in the box. You practically need 2 boxes to get everything back in. How in the world do they get all these pieces? Most people can't. She returned, cutting him off. Would you like cash or credit? No one said much on the way home. Peter talked about anything. He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember what he had said 10 seconds after he had said it. Andrew was painfully quiet. Liz hadn't said a word since entering Home Depot. Sharon was too young to know. You did it, Daddy, she said. But picking up on the silence from Andrew and Liz, she knew something was wrong. I wonder what's for supper, Peter asked, not expecting an answer. $158 sat in his pocket, but it didn't sit very still. Supper was ready when they got home. The family usually held hands to pray, each person encouraged to say a few words before the meal. Mary didn't look at Peter. No one looked at each other. Pete usually started, but Pete said, maybe somebody else can start. Andrew shuffled. Maybe me, said Andrew. First words he had spoken since getting home. Dear God, he started, be with my dad. Help him not to feel too guilty about what he did. He's my dad. Thanks for the food. He's my dad. He's my dad. The family ate in silence. That had never happened before. After supper, I'm going back, Peter announced, head down. And anyone's welcome to come with me. The children quickly announced that their plates were full after dinner. Their agendas set, their commitments cemented, and they had seen enough of Home Depot for about a year. Pete had to face this alone. Andrew felt more than he watched his dad get ready to leave. Shoes, coat. Andrew sheltered himself behind the living room curtain. The family pretended to occupy themselves, but they watched every move Pete made. The moment the truck left the curb, Andrew had walked to where the truck had been and stood there for a full minute before the pacing started. He kept looking out to where the truck had last rounded the corner. Mary later told Pete that he had never left the scene. Andrew stood guard over that parking lot, had nervously walked back and forth over the shadow where the truck had been. Mary had come out to see where he was. "I'm so worried," Andrew said. "I should be with him. I'm so afraid." "He's doing the right thing, Andrew," Mary said. "Yeah, but it's my fault. I made him feel bad." "No, Andrew. You helped him see. You gave him a gift." Pete went back to the returns and confessed. It was done, but the shame remained. Pete knew he'd been staring at the ceiling for weeks to come. When he returned, Andrew was there. In fact, Pete nearly hit him as Andrew jumped in front of the truck. He just stood there as Dad opened the door. Pete would never forget that face. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he said. "What did they say? Was it bad? I'm sorry that..." "No, Andrew, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart," Pete said. "I took my eye off the ball. Thank you, son." It was an odd place for a family reunion. The sidewalk in front of their house. Group hug. They huddled together almost as if they had survived a hurricane. Perhaps in some ways they had. "I'm glad I've got you all here," Pete said, breaking up the hug fest. "I've got something in the back of the truck, and it's really going to be awesome. You're going to love it like a real family." He pulled down the tailgate, and there it was, a garden shed, 8 by 8. Weather-resistant vinyl, thick plastic construction, easy to construct. Even a child could do it. A little like a Lego building project, it said on the side of the package. When he finished, he turned around only to hear the sound of the front door closing. Joe, we need you.
I hear you're doing well, my ballerina, since the carnival left town. I get all the news and the gossip from around. I hear you found some temporary lover who can keep your pockets full and protect your past from all the other animals. No one can touch you like me. No one can touch me like you do. So why don't you call me into your curtains anymore? We used to fall asleep on this floor. I joined the traveling circus band, where the sky is the bottom of the land, where the tightrope dancer stands, where the princess hides in the valley with her medicine and machete. She's gonna kill her mind with eternity. No one can touch No one can touch me like you do. So why don't you call me into your curtains anymore? We used to fall asleep on the floor. Thanks.
Well, there you have it. So the next time you peer into your neighbor's backyard, be thankful that you don't live beside Pete, because who knows what you'll see. I know this morning wasn't maybe what some of you came expecting, but for some of you, it was what you needed. And I trust that you'll go home this week with more than you came in with. I have a couple of housekeeping things that I need to do before we finish, and I hope that's okay. But there's coffee, and there's some stuff there, and generally what we like to do here is hang around and take as much time as we need to visit with as many people as you want to. So I invite you, once I'm done the housekeeping items, to please stick around, get to know some folks. If this is your first time here, thanks for coming. We appreciate that. We will prevail. We're not digital experts, but we will get on the internet, and you will be able to see this morning on our website at some point along the way. So feel free to do that and share it with your friends. Thanks for coming. Back Porch is for you, and hopefully we'll be back soon. Take care.